Hey everybody, today we're working on a Ford Fusion 2006 model. There's what the body looks like. Pretty much any body style, Mazdas, whatever's. This one happens to be a manual transmission, and we have the 2.3 liter. Okay. This customer came in, he was pouring a little bit of oil. It was a steady drip. Here's his underpan, just soaked in oil. It was just everywhere. At first I thought it was coming out of the filter housing, because they're known to crack, you know, they're plastic. And he had just had an oil change done. So I cleaned it, put it up in the air, ran it, and we found that it was coming out of the rear main. And what I did is I pulled this boot here. You can see how it's really wet. But once I popped that boot out, it just poured out because it had collected inside the boot. And so I knew at that point it had been slinging it. And you can see here around the starter we have oil coming out and dripping down on the side of the bell housing on the front of the engine where the filter housing is, and that's kind of what misled me to the filter. Anyways, after getting the proper diagnosis and discovering the rear main leak, customer agreed to the repair, and we're gonna drop this thing out. So thus far I've pulled the shifter cables, these little clips. You just let's see, where is it? You just spread the ends here that go through the plastic. You just spread them out and you just pop the whole thing off of the stud there. Okay, you can see the little notch where those clips notch in. There's just a little notch in there for that wire. Anyway, so I pushed it up out of the way, got it out of the way, disconnected the speed sensor way down there, removed the two 10mm bolts for the slave line, removed the clip and the bracket for the line here. I just wanted to make sure I had enough room. Removed the battery box, the battery tray, excuse me. And then there was also a bracket down here that held this wiring harness as well as part of the tray. So once I got all out of the way, this is where I'm at. I have left up here the motor mount and some bell housing bolts. And I also have to get the axles out. So up to this point, it's been pretty simple. We're gonna go up in the air and see what we got underneath. Okay, so we've removed the front wheels. To get the axles, we need to remove the axle nut, obviously. I usually drive a screwdriver that I've narrowed to this slot and push that nut back out where it's staked in. Makes it a little easier to get off. And so we need to remove the nut, and then we gotta follow this in here, and we have a center support for this side. Okay, there's a couple bolts up there. They're a little difficult to see from down here. There we go, there's a couple of them. They're kind of hidden up there. Those two bolts. Okay, they look like a 13. All right, and then we've got this bolt that goes through the bell housing from the block side. When you get that bolt, these lower bell housing bolts. Okay, so there's a couple going this way, and then there's one going this way over here. And then we're gonna pull the slave cylinder. We're just gonna loosen the starter and get it up out of the way of the flywheel. We don't need to completely remove it. You can leave all the wires connected. We just need to pull the two bolts and lift it up so that we can slide the transmission straight back. You can see under here where it's dripping really bad. That's where it was just kind of pouring out of and coming out of from way up there from the starter housing hole. Just dripping down the block really bad. Anyways, so we got that. The other thing I did was I pulled the dog bone. It sits right here, two 15mm bolts, and it just kind of pops right out. And at this point there's only the front and the rear mount holding this engine up, so we have to be careful once we get to this point that we don't damage anything. Over on this side, again, we've got the axle nut to do, and then we're just gonna pop it out You know, stick a pry bar in here, pop them out. This side will just slide right out. The only thing holding this side in is the bolts for the center carrier. But this side is going to be snap ringed in. Sometimes they're difficult. I have a really big pry bar that I use, but you got to be careful that you don't pry too hard on the housing, because you can crack it and cause an issue and cost yourself money. But that's pretty much it so far. We're going to drop these two nuts here. We're going to, I think I got enough room here to drop the spindle past the studs for the lower control arms and remove the axle. We don't have to pull it all the way out, we just have to get it out of the transmission. So I may end up leaving the axle nut on. I don't know, we're going to see how that goes. Okay, so on this side you can see we got the axle nut still in there. We were able to leave it in. Saw the process of knocking these control arm joints out. So we just pull the whole knuckle to the side, pulling it away from the transmission. You can see here we're completely clear. Just got it resting back there, and swiveled the center bracket to hold it in place there. And then on this side I kind of had to use a zip tie, and I just put it right over the top of the sway link and just lifted that whole axle up and out of the way, so that when I'm ready to do stuff it's not going to be any problem. So axles are out. Did not have to remove the nuts, which is good because then we don't have to re-torque them. They require a specific torque if you do pull them out. And like I said, this one just slides right out as soon as you pull the bolts for the center bracket there. The other side had to pop free with a ring. Let's see if we can see it. Yeah, there it is, right on the end there. See that ring? That's what holds that driver's one in place. You gotta pop that out. Be difficult sometimes. If you're having trouble, spin the wheel 180 and try again. Alright, we're about ready to pull this transmission down. One little side note, right here below the fork, this really long bolt, I kind of missed it because just everything's gray under here. Anyways, that one was a really long one that I found. It goes all the way through there. And then up here, there was one right here, okay, and that one's easily, as you can see. Then right above it, there's this one with this little stud sticking off of it, and it goes through the bell housing from this direction as well. I had to use a wrench because you can see it's high up there above this heat shield here, so I couldn't really put my air tool on it. I would have had to come all the way over here with an extension, but it just seemed easier just to do a ratchet real quick. Anyways, we finally got all of the bell housing bolts out. Get them all together. And everything is clear. So our clutch slave has been put up to the side there. I just hung it on the upper radiator hose. Supporting the engine with a pole jack and a block of wood under the pan. And as soon as I started cracking all the bolts, it just started dripping. Oh gosh, it must be full of oil in there. Oh god, I got a big mess on the floor already. Anyways, we're gonna see if we can pop this free. It's gonna get more help. The old pry bar. So I know there's a couple of dowels in here somewhere. Yeah, see, there's one right there. You can see it. Okay, so as soon as we cleared those dowels, oh Jesus. She is dripping good now. Okay, and then along the back side here too, it looks like we're free. Okay. I'll worry about the mess afterwards. What a yucky mess. Alright, we have to take a break, see how the hell I get this thing out of here. Didn't say nothing about pulling the subframe or nothing like that, so I expected just to be able to drop it out, but looks like we're going to be more involved in that. Alright everybody, so I got to the point where I was pulling the transmission away from the engine and realized I did not have the clearance. One little important step I missed in the instructions, because it was just one little line in the whole thing, was to remove the subframe. Okay, so we got a big nut here. We're gonna have to disconnect all of this power steering plumbing. There's all these little hold downs all around the whole frame. Then we're gonna have to get the steering. We have one bolt here. God. We've got another one back here. And I believe another one, yeah, it's really hard to see. But there's the head of that one. So I think there's two over there on the driver's side, one on the passenger. So we have to disconnect those, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably strap it up to the exhaust, so that way it doesn't come out of the steering shaft. What a mess. What a mess. So all this, let's see what's over here. Nothing up front really. So it starts here, this pressure line. Okay, so just this one here. Then you've got this return line that wraps all the way around the driver's side of the frame. Okay, and then obviously we have the low control arms loose. And then we're gonna have to pull this bolt here for the strut fork. Okay, looks like a 15, I think. Yeah, 15 millimeter. And then the whole subframe is going to come down, and then we can separate the transmission. Oh joy. Hey everybody, just one last note on that, since I forgot to make the last part of the video. I did end up having to pull the subframe. It was the 4 big nuts, they're 21 millimeter, and then you had a couple of 15 millimeter bolts on the brackets on the rear of the subframe. After that it came right out. The 3 bolts for the steering rack, you can easily access them from up top with a long extension, or you can get them from underneath, either way. But all I did was tie it up to the exhaust, and I just used a ratchet strap and I wrapped it around the exhaust and went around the steering rack so that I wouldn't have to pull the steering input shaft, because they're just a pain in the butt. So everything stays right up there while the subframe is down, and after that it's a breeze. And obviously installation is reverse of removal, so you guys should get it from there. If you got any questions or whatever, leave it in the comments.